Welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, hello, guys. Welcome to the EntrePastor podcast on YouTube. My name is Jon. I'm one of the co-founders of EntrePastor as well as a co-host of the show. And I am excited to introduce you to the guest in this week's episode. You're going to love this guy. His name is Cesar Kalinowski, and he is a pastor that has been doing ministry in a really unique way for a long time now, and really leveraging the marketplace to fund the missionary / pastoral work that he and his wife have been involved in. I love the business model that they have. I love how they've, leveraged business to support their ministry work. And I love all the ministry opportunities that have come as a result of them being out in the marketplace. It's so much of what we encourage and talk about on EntrePastors. So I can't wait to share this interview that myself and my co-host Les Hughes did recently with Cesar. Without any further ado, let's get to this. You're going to hear Cesar talk about his platform, Everyday Disciple, and so much more on this episode. So here we go. Let's do it. Well, Cesar, welcome to the EntrePastors podcast, man. It's a delight to have you on the show.
Here we are. It's great to be together all the way from Illinois, Midwestern roots, I guess. Yeah. No, I'm not there anymore. Neither are you. But
well, tell us where you're from now. Where do you call home these days?
Seattle Metro. I live in a town called Gig Harbor. We've been in the Tacoma area, which is all suburbs of Seattle. Almost 20 years. Hard to believe. Almost.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question that's totally not related? Well, maybe it is related to some of the discipleship work you do. But a few years ago, my wife and I went out to that part of the country for the first time. We'd never really been to the Northwest, and I got asked to come and do a wedding. And so we took a few extra days and explored Seattle, and I loved it, man. I thought it was a beautiful city, a beautiful area. Of course, this was right, pre-COVID, and maybe the year before COVID. And so then after all that craziness went down, I've just been seeing, things from the news and TikTok and whatnot of Seattle. Is Seattle okay? Or like, how's you doing?
What are you doing?
What?
John, what are you doing? What are you doing, bro? We don't get into all that stuff on this.
I just want to know how Seattle's doing. I'm not asking about the politics of it. I'm just saying,
well, let's just say in parts of the downtown area, pretty rough.
Yeah.
Not as bad as Portland or San Francisco.
See, now I don't feel so bad. I was going to ask you about if you were a serial killer or a vampire, but I don't feel bad about that at all.
Why would I? Wow, wait, what's the connection there?
Yeah, I mean, they're all from up there, I thought. What? I mean, anytime they're just, but that's mostly Portland.
You guys got to get out of the sticks a little bit more often, huh? Turn the TV on once in a while, read a book. No, it's a beautiful part of the world. Let me just tell you something. Maybe you don't know, maybe your listeners don't know. Washington State's I think it's the only place in the world. We have every single ecosystem that exists on the planet in one state, except for we don't have tropics. But I live on the Puget Sound, which is inland coastal saltwater, seals, whales, dolphins, but 2 hours to the coast. We have foothills, a lot of them, and we have one of the tallest mountains in the world, Rainier here. There's high desert, low desert, old growth forest, rainforest. The only thing we don't have is tropic. So
it's beautiful. And that's why I asked the question, Les. It was out of a heart of concern for a city that I really enjoyed. And this is a side note.
We go from beauty to Les is going serial killers. No,
yeah, serial killer vampires. So what are you doing, Les? We don't ask about serial killers and vampires on this show. So, all right, now that we've totally run the rails off of this thing.
Now that everybody's tuned out because they're like, what's this podcast about?
This was going to be good. And they're talking about, anyway, Seattle's beautiful. That's all I was trying to say. And
we like it. We like it.
COVID kind of messed all that up. I had plans to go to the Minnesota Vikings, Seattle Seahawks game was my plan, to take my wife there because she likes the Seahawks because of their colors. And anyway, I was like, yeah, let's go back to Seattle.
There's a reason for picking a team.
Right. Anyway, well, good to have you on the show, man. And here's what we want to do. I think we've got a ton of stuff where your world intersects with ours and a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Why don't we start by a current snapshot of where you are right now in terms of ministry, entrepreneurship, just kind of paint the picture for us. And then maybe we'll go back from there. And I know there's some rabbit trails we're going to want to run down. So
sure.
Paint the picture.
Sure. Right now, my wife and I coach. That's a lot of what we're doing, and create disciple making resources. Our world's called everydaydisciple.com. It's just the idea of what's it look like to live out our faith the other 6 days and 22 hours and make disciples in community as the norm, as a lifestyle. And so that's what I write to and speak to, and we coach. And something we do uniquely is my wife and I coach as a couple, and we coach couples. And I've been coaching a really long time, used to coach just church planters, and it was always a dude fest, and they'd get all excited about all the new stuff that was going to start happening in the house and in the neighborhood with people of peace and with their friends and all. And they'd come home or off the meetings, and they'd tell their wives all the things that they had to start changing and everything. It didn't go well, Yeah. So once we started coaching as couples to couples, it changed a lot. So pretty much that's what we give most of our time to now is creating resources for that, and books and weekly podcasts and coaching. I love it. The ripple effect of the fruit of working with people who are serious about making disciples and leading their churches this way, as a lifestyle, pretty awesome. So that's kind of what we're up to and giving ourselves to, including being grandparents now. And we are nuts. We're crazy.
That is so cool.
I cleaned my calendar this morning to go have breakfast with 2 of my grandkids because I couldn't take it anymore. I hadn't seen them in like 10 days, and I couldn't wait 3 more days.
Right. I hear you, man. I just became a grandpa in the last little over a year ago, and it is a cool gig. Les has been a grandpa for a few years longer than me. But
it's the best. We have 4 now, and it's the best.
Yeah. If I would have known it was that cool, we'd have just skipped the parenting part and gone right to the grandparents.
I'm with you. We have a little sign that says that.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. So how would you answer this question if someone said, are you a pastor? Are you a pastor, Caesar?
It depends who's asking that. If it's another pastor or someone in the ministry or world, it's like, yeah, I mean, I still see myself as a pastor. I've pastored for years and serial church planter. And really what we do is pastor people in discipleship, because that's our lifestyle, is disciple making. That's kind of all we do. But if my neighbors ask me if I'm a pastor, then I would usually say, I don't know. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I don't know. Like some of them are going, oh, they meant priest, but they use the word pastor to try to hip it up. Or I'm like, I don't know. So I'll ask questions when people ask me. People all the time, though, it's just a male thing, maybe it's just American thing. They always go, oh, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And so depending on, it's usually I roll it out in pieces. I'll go, oh, well, I'm a lucky guy. I get to travel a whole lot, and I write. I'm an author, and I get to speak and train on stuff. And if that's as far as it goes, I leave it there. If they go, oh, well, what do you write about? I go, well, we write about our faith and our spirituality, but lived out in everyday life, as maybe compared to like the more formalized part of our faith life. I'm like, oh, are you Christians? I'm like, yeah, very much. It's this lifestyle of following Jesus, but into normal life. And so I just kind of roll it out as people are understanding it versus here's my elevator speech.
Yeah. Well, that's why I asked the question, because I get the sense that you absolutely are a pastor, but not in the traditional sense that, even many in our audience would connect with. And so, and by the way, I answer very similar it kind of depends on the setting and scenario. I have several different irons in the fire. So I rarely lead with, I'm a pastor. I mean, in certain circles I might, but in most I don't. But why don't we—
In Tacoma for years, I was kind of known as the pub pastor.
Okay.
It was weird. I didn't give myself that moniker, but because we were so soaked into the neighborhoods, and that includes finding your locals, cafes and pubs and all, and hanging out and getting to know the staff and, tipping, over tipping, and, buy around once in a while, all those kind of things. People know who you are. And then our kids are grown, so they also knew a bunch of them. Plus they knew the folks in our communities. And so they kind of like, you're kind of a pastor guy or something. Like, I need to talk to you about some stuff, and that's like, all right, whatever. It might have been their budget, could have been their identity, gender. It could have been their marriage, or they're thinking about getting married, or something going on with their lives. And it's like, yeah, I'll talk to you. So I kind of become known as the pub pastor.
Yeah, I like that. So let's back up then, because I believe you kind of migrated from a season in your life where you were in that more traditional ministry setting. And I'd love to hear that story. Like, how did you get to where you are today from where you were years ago? Like, fill in some of those details for us.
Well, I'll back up just a tick even more than that. My wife and I are serial entrepreneurs, and we've owned and operated over 25 businesses and nonprofits at this point.
Wow.
But years ago, we were really involved in our local church and ministry. I wasn't officially pastoring. And I was traveling quite a bit. I had helped found this organization, still exists, SWI, Strategic World Impact, delivering relief and aid into war zones and where the church is persecuted, things like that, natural disaster. And I was doing that and running some companies. And at 40, I kind of got the call, like usually it's your college or whatever. But at 40, I got the call, like, you're going to leave all that work and stuff and move much more towards, and it was actually the clearest was, and you're going to be a pastor now. And I was like, okay, Dad, but guess what? I'm not one. You know that. I haven't been to seminary. I haven't been, and I've got all these commitments to our company and board and shareholders and partners, and I can't just blow that off. So I say yes, because you're Dad. I'm in on the joke with you, but I don't know how to get there. And through a series, literally, of miraculous events, within 90 days, not my idea, but like the head of the board, he said, how about we release you from this? We're going to combine a couple of these divisions, and you can either have your shares back or you can just keep shares in the whole. We'll give you a huge severance and you're free.
Wow.
And my partner, my local partner, was like, throwing up almost, like, what's going on? Things are falling apart. I'm like, oh no, this is a direct answer to prayer. Are you kidding me? And so I had this really big glide path, and then and I was like, so then I'm extricated within 30 days of that event. So now it's 120 days. I'm like done. I'm out. Like, offices moved. I'm just sitting around remodeling the basement. And I was like, okay, now Lord, you've cleaned that up miraculously, but I'm still not, I'm not pastoring. And then the church we were at, which is a very large church, kind of got wind that I was free, and a pastoral position in communications had opened up. And that was my background, really. And so all of a sudden I found myself at 40 on staff, communications pastor, and I ended up being in charge of all of production. So putting on the show and all that. And since I was doing international, eventually that became my bailiwick as well. And so it was, that was sort of the slide. That's how I sort of became a pastor. But all the while, we always still had a business or two kind of going on,
Mm-hmm. So tell me about the journey then away from that, because I'm assuming you're not in that role anymore. You're not on staff in a traditional church in that sense, correct?
Right. I am not. And so we moved out here then to Tacoma, Washington in 2004 to really live like missionaries, to start making disciples in neighborhoods, just like we had been sent to, Chile or Zimbabwe or whatever. We're going to live like missionaries in a neighborhood there was just a handful of us, and make disciples and see what happens with that. We really want to live that level of authenticity, just like what we're seeing in the book of Acts. Like, do we get to? I think we do. And so started doing that, but to support ourselves, we had some apartments we were renting. We bought a restaurant that was breakfast all day and doing all that. And we just did all of that then for a lot of years. I would say now maybe about 5 or 6 years ago-ish, felt like the Lord said, I want you to focus now, and I want you to get rid of all of that stuff and really give, your focus to the writing and the creating of the assets and tools and resources and all that, and give yourself to coaching. And I travel quite a bit training folks and all this. But so we really now, the only businesses that we're running are connected to the things that support all of that, so publishing and there's a lot of production that goes on in the background and stuff like that. So, but it's very focused now. I feel very lazy sometimes because we don't have 4 or 5 things running. I'm like, wow, you're getting lazy in your old focus. That's my word this year. Focus.
I want to get into that.
John,
go ahead.
Yeah. If I could drill down a little bit there, this is a question that a lot of our community asks. And that is, you've got, and looking at what you have now, I'm sure it started very simple, but now you've got this platform, and there's a publishing part of it and a speaking part of it, and then probably some client work, or almost, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but almost a consulting sort of deal in the area of discipleship anyway. Yeah. So I guess a couple of questions. We encourage our people as much as possible to create these, streams of revenue so that they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. But can be kind of an inconsistent deal. Like, it's either sometimes feast or famine, and there'll be some people in the pipeline, and then those are paying customers or paying clients. Yeah. But if they're not pulling other people into the pipeline, that gig can end, and all of a sudden there's a drought, and it's like, uh-oh. So did you set up your current business as a not-for-profit, or is it for-profit? And you get say whatever you're comfortable answering this now, by the way.
I'm an open book. I'm an
Okay.
open book, Les.
So I'm just getting practical for the people that are listening and wonder how that, because you're way down the road and a lot of our people are just sort of starting out and building something. So
Well, we are way down the road. We have made a decided effort in the last, like I said, 5-6 years to really focus on a lot narrower channel than everything. And we've seen so much fruit in it. And like God just kept, saying, you see what I'm doing there, right? And you get to give it. But we made a decided effort to try to get into streams of income, the revenue that these things might produce that were much more evergreen, much more recurring in nature. Mm-hmm. So like our coaching is that way. We coach people. It's a 12-month commitment minimally. Most of the folks we coach, by God's grace, it's life-changing, and they go on for years with us as they're multiplying communities or transitioning churches to this type of a lifestyle. The publishing company, I had some assets of mine, books in mine, that I had to kind of get back. And in so doing, part of that included buying one of the publishing companies. It wasn't very big, but it was allowed us to do some things with those assets that kind of better fit our world. And so, obviously you still have to sell these books and keep them, in the public zeitgeist and put out new works and all that. But there's an every month nature to some of that. And some months you're like, oh my gosh, look at what God did. And look at the Amazon numbers this month. And other months you're like, did the website break? And then, and I'll be honest with you, God's so in it though, Les, because I don't really advertise like, hey, I'm going to come train, it's on my website. Hey, if you want any of this, let me know, kind of thing. But I'm not actively marketing any of these things. But a lot of folks hear the podcast. That's a way that I've built a lot of relationships with the Everyday Disciple podcast. It's been that my wife, as she ran the restaurant for 8 years, we owned it together, but she was really the primary person running it. She's a chef, and she knows a lot more about that business than I did. I mostly just ate there and fixed broken things. But that was going on while all this was going on. We lived in Manhattan for a couple of years, not that long ago. And we maintained our businesses in Washington State and our home and the restaurant and all that. And my wife went back and forth a whole lot. So, but because we've done so many different businesses, we've been able to say, hey, what are the things we really like? And what are the things we seem to be good at? And what are the things that can sort of run on their own or scale a little bit easier without having to staff up? We've had plenty of staffs over the years. Right now, we're not choosing to have a whole lot of staff, just a little bit of virtual, So it is a much tougher thing to go from I'm pastoring. I don't have any IP per se, like intellectual property, lots of books. I don't have that, it is a slower process. And in the meantime, there's a lot of prayer. My wife has taken jobs, here and there because we can't afford healthcare right now. So she's like, I'm going to get a job at this company, 20 hours a week just because they have really good healthcare. Thank you, honey. So it's very much the life we feel like of missionaries in a sense where we're trusting God for that. And yet, we have a membership that's running. We have coaching that's running. We have publishing that's running. I speak, do some training, right? All those types of things. So
that is very
we're
helpful.
Big believers in the multiple streams thing. I'd hate to have one.
That's really helpful. Thank you for that. I appreciate you going into the details of that.
Two things that come to mind with that, and just one I'll just want to double down on. We agree on the multiple streams of revenue. Like when we see a pastor in the traditional sense that's in that role of, I work for one church and I have one income that comes from that one church. We've just seen where that has caused a lot of problems. Certainly God is a provider. Yes and amen. But we love when we can see pastors develop multiple streams of revenue for many different reasons. We think it's good. I want to drill down into something you said a minute ago. You've used this word missionary, and I'll make a distinction and then let you kind of run with it in whatever direction you want. If any of our churches had a missionary that we sent off to another part of the world, and they wrote back to us and said, man, praise God, we found an into the community, and they're paying us for it. Like, we get to show up and work at such and such a place, and we get income from that. And then through that, we're meeting all kinds of people that's opening the door for gospel-centered conversations to be had. We would all, as believers back here celebrate that. And, oh, that's amazing. But for many pastors, the thought of having to go out into the community and have a job is met with like a level of disappointment or maybe even shame, and like, oh, too bad you can't really make it as a real pastor.
Yeah.
And it's viewed as this necessary evil, that, man, let's get you out of that as quick as we can so we can get you back inside the four walls of your church office. I just like, I love how you're talking about missionaries, but you're missionaries in Tacoma, Washington, and you think like a missionary. So we're going to go fund our work, not necessarily by asking people for donations, but through business, through something entrepreneurial that's going to pay the bills. It's going to introduce us to people who need Jesus. So I love that distinction. You can go in any direction you want with that, but I just wanted to highlight that as a part of this conversation.
Well, yeah, I completely agree with all that. Here's how we've articulated this to a lot of people, though. We really believe being a missionary is not a locational thing. It's an identity thing, because we're created in the image of a triune God, Father, Son, and Spirit. Because God's all of our dad. That makes us brothers and sisters. So we really are family. So that's just the reality of it. Like it or not, love, we churches say it, but what if you lived like that truly? And we do. We open our home completely. We're also created in the image of the Son, who was sent as a servant. And he says, as I was sent, so I send you. And so we're servants, but that sentness, that sent one received the Spirit, he says, now go make disciples. That we take sent one in English and we say missionary. So missionary, really, if you're in Christ, you're a Christian, you're a missionary. Truly, like it's a being thing. Birds, they fly because they get to, they're birds. We're missionaries. And so I think we get to live this way. The good news of the gospel is we're loved deeply by God regardless. However, I don't see it as two classes. Well, some Christians are, now we also tell people, since that's true of you, so can we just trust God for how he chooses to route your, income? Like God's agreed, I'll meet all your needs. So I'll say to people, like pastors at conference, hey, everybody slept sheltered last night? Yeah, you guys all have clothes on, that I can see. Everybody eaten in the last 24 hours, unless maybe you're fasting for blood work or something, Yep, we all have eaten. Okay, so God's completely kept his word. He's kept his end of the bargain. Like your needs are being met. Mine too, praise God. My kids and I, we've never slept under a bridge yet, other than when we chose to, whatever, And so we said, so you're all full-time, fully funded missionaries. But some people, God chooses to route that, that blessing through working at Amazon or as a doctor or at a local church where the community says, hey, like we want to free you up, for the things that you do to bless us and all that. Can we trust God for that? Because I know some people, it's crazy. They work for this really large corporation, and they said, this is nuts. I go there, check this out. I go to work every day. They've given me my own room, an office, beautiful, actually. It's crazy. And then all day long, I get to interact with people. In fact, they come to this room, they come to my office like all day, and they got problems, and I get to hear their stories, and I get to try to bless them and love on them. And at times, even give them some good news, of the gospel and all. And here's what's nuts. Every 2 weeks, I get a little envelope on my desk, and there's a check in it. It's crazy, like I'm just getting to do that. And I'm like, I want people to see themselves this way. Let God route that. Now, the reason I'm going there so deep on that, John, flip that too. Is it okay if someone who also has a call to a pastorate or a vocational calling, is it okay if they also trust God for how he chooses to route that income? I think it is. I think we can maybe even go there. I think there's a whole lot of benefits to the church and staff and all that being much more deeply connected to the culture. The whole time we were rapidly planting churches, Soma communities out of Tacoma and all that, like rapidly, the whole time we were running this breakfast restaurant all day. We had apartments. We were on the business district association board and all that. We know everybody, now we don't own those businesses, but what our version of that is my wife's on the HOA. And so am I, committee here. And so we know everybody, 95 homes. So it's the same kind of mindset. We're going to invest in that. And I think it's good, and I think it's right. And I think it's also quite historical. It's really this anomaly of the last, you guys are experts in this. This is why we tune into your show. it's only the last 75, 100 years max that this paid level of staff was considered the norm. And now everybody kind of shot for that. Like, you're a super Christian if you can make it. Oh, if you ever make it to the end zone of getting on staff and paid,
Yeah.
I remember feeling that way.
Yep.
I remember feeling that way, like, but then it was only 3 or 4 years and I was like, like, I don't know, man, I want to get back in the neighborhood. And it was weird because when I was doing all the international travel, and I still do quite a bit, but I'd be like, say, in Sudan or in a refugee camp in Uganda or something. My favorite time was not speaking at the pastors' conferences. I loved being with the people. I wanted to be in the villages. I wanted to be with the kids. I wanted them to teach me games. I wanted to tell story. I wanted to hear their stories. One time I took a whole bunch of cameras with me, those instant, kind of disposable ones. And I gave them to all these orphans. And I said, I want you to take pictures of all your favorite things and then bring me the camera back. Amazing pictures, And so all of a sudden I'm helping steer this mega church as one of the pastors and one of the 5 people on the lead team. And I'm like, it's wonderful. A lot of great stuff, but I am really missing the making disciples part.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where I realized I had not one not yet believing friend, no unbelieving friends.
Yeah. I went through a very similar thing. And, before I got back into the full-time fire service, and it was just a breath of fresh air, man, to be able to sit around that table with guys and gals that don't think like me, vote like me, talk like me. And I needed it, because I had gotten to that place where all of our staff at church were believers, maybe with the exception of the secretary. We're not sure about her yet.
Easy.
But, yeah,
Easy.
she hated
Thought
it.
you were going to say Gladys.
Yeah, no, Gladys. God bless Gladys. So let me go there then. I was going to ask kind of what is the overall or the overarching message of everyday disciple? I mean, you've certainly been alluding to that, but if we met and we're going in an elevator and you got just a few minutes to tell me what it's all about, how do you answer that question?
It's really about applying the gospel, the good news of the gospel to be able to see the good news and speak it and experience it in every area of life, not just connected to our afterlife. The way I was raised, and I've been in church since I was a fetus, the way I was raised, Christianity, here's how it was. See if this sounds familiar to anybody. Okay. The gospel was primarily about your afterlife upgrade. It really was. It was all about heaven, getting to heaven and avoiding hell. And then Christianity, what's that all about? Well, that's between now and Jesus getting back, or you dying and going to be with him. Try to sin less. It was about behavioral modification and sin management.
Yeah.
But that's not what it's about. That's not how Jesus talked about it at all and didn't do it. So we said, well, what if we could grow in our fluency of the gospel, this ability to speak the good news to every area of life? And that's kind of how we describe discipleship. We say discipleship is this process of helping others and them helping us move from unbelief to belief in light of the gospel in every area of life. So how does the gospel actually speak in good news and transform every area of my life? My marriage, my parenting, my identity, disciple making, my work, my career, retirement, vacation, divorce, sickness, health, life, death, right? Does the gospel speak to all of that? Not just my afterlife? Well, absolutely it does. And so if discipleship is the process of helping people move from unbelief to belief in every area, guess what? Discipleship is going to have to take place in every area of life. And so what we do is we help people live out the gospel in everyday life and make the 6 days and 22 hours outside of Sunday, filled with, a growing spiritual freedom. God's not against us and he's for us, and a relational peace with others. And it's so attractive. It's like a little kingdom outpost. And it's not hard to get people to go you got to help us understand the way you live and tell us, because the way you talk about Jesus in the church is very different than, my upbringing or whatever. So that's really it. It's how do you make discipleship a lifestyle versus a set of programs or a 9-week study or an attending an event? We're going to try to do it way, way, way more like Jesus did it. And that's,
before we started recording, you just mentioned kind of flipping the model on its head. And it reminded me of a conversation I had years ago with a dear friend that's been a church planter in Brazil for, really second generation, been there his whole life. And one time, me and a couple other pastors were on a call with him, and he just said, "You guys in the States," he's like, you do it all backwards. You start off with the big Sunday worship experience and the big gathering, and then try to figure out how to break it up from there into smaller groups." And he said, we do it very different. He said, we get little cell groups going, and once we have a number of those cell groups going, and only then do we gather together for a bigger celebration service. And it sounded like, just very briefly from our conversation, that's kind of where you are as well.
Yeah, that is. It's so interesting. You know what else we've gotten backwards? This one's even bigger, and this one flipped our switch like several years ago. You know the passage in John 8 where Jesus says the truth will set you free? We love that. That's a favorite Christian verse, especially among Christians if you're trying to win an argument. Well, all right, John, well, the truth will set you free. No. But if you back up in that verse just a little bit, here's what Jesus says in the whole verse. And I'm just paraphrasing it a tick. People can look it up. He says, if you'll walk in my ways, if you'll be my disciples, truly, then, huge then, right in the middle of the passage, then you will come to know the truth, and that truth will set you free. Now, notice the order. Be my disciple, walk in my ways, so that then you will come to know truth that sets you free. But what have we done? And listen, I'm guilty as charged. This is how I was taught and pastored early on. We flip that model 180. We go, hey, once you believe what we say is true, and all Christians believe the exact same thing, by the way. Then we'll lead you in the magic Jesus in your heart prayer, the one you'll never find in the Bible, but we're going to do that. You're going to get set free, but you won't feel much different yet. And then we're going to disciple you, except most churches don't. So we do it backwards, but we don't even do it consistently backwards. And then we wonder why we have the church we have and why there's so little maturity and so much multiplication, so little multiplication of fruit. Wait a minute. Jesus says, if you'll be my disciple, walk in my ways, then you come to know the truth. And this wasn't a global truth, like then you'll get your get out of hell card. If we look wider in that passage, it was more like this. Hey, if you walk in the ways of Jesus, so with these other people, they're learning to walk with him and they live generously because they realize they're not their own provision, God is. And that's how you met them. Remember when they paid your huge electric bill and they got your car fixed for you and now you're like part of the family? If you'll walk in my ways, then you'll come to know the truth about provision and God's generosity, and you'll get set free too. It's like that. And so that's why discipleship, this process of moving from unbelief to belief or lies to truth in every area of life. And it's beautiful to watch people who walk in the ways of Jesus getting set free in more and more areas of their life as they learn to trust Jesus and his Father in more and more areas of their life.
That's beautiful. So right? Putting myself in the role of just kind of a normal traditional pastor that's hearing this and maybe even going, I even agree with it, but I don't know how I get from where I am today to something like that, because again, this is my paycheck here and I don't know how I go to that. But setting that part of it aside, I'm just asking a question from like a structural standpoint. Practically speaking, what does it look like then for you to live that out? If there's not a building per se that you gather in, and there's not a weekly cadence of these are the things that are required to quote do church. You're just living a life. You're just out there in the community living life, building relationships. At what point does that then get structured? Is there any way that you bring structure to that to say, now it is time for us to have some form of weekly gathering or something? Or is that not even something you wrestle with? Or if so, how?
No, completely. We talk about life in a missional community is both organized and organic, just like a family life. Okay. So think of it. These are really extended families. That's the word oikos. It's the only word really we see when referencing the churches in the New Testament is the oikos that met at so-and-so's. It's these extended families, but they're just like your family life and mine. They're both organized and organic. We did Easter a couple weeks ago here, right? A big old thing at our house. It was like 2 days worth of stuff. There was aspects of it that were organized. When are we eating? What are we eating? Who's bringing what? Are we taking the kids to the egg hunt? Who else is coming over? People of peace. I'm bringing so-and-so cool. But the organics, all the conversations and the other things that sprung out of it. And let's get together this week and do that. Or, you know what I mean? All that. So life in a community that's intentionally making disciples, helping people walk in the ways of Jesus, same thing. There are organized aspects. So like for us, a weekly, like sort of open table, and that might be a brunch, or it might be a dinner, or it might be s'mores fire pit thing, or it might be happy hour. That's a big one in our neighborhood. That is an open door to allow us to build relationships with people and build trust and see who's leaning in, like who's a person of peace. But then there's also the believing people who start to say, hey, we're going to get together one night a week for like a family dinner and pray for each other. Maybe there's some equipping time. We're getting ready to take a whole bunch of people through the story of God here again real soon. That's a narrative and dialogical method of teaching the whole Bible in story form, though. We're going to regularly, maybe like on a monthly rhythm, get out and serve in our community together. Now, as these communities, as we're developing leaders, and you have to keep your eye on that multiplication leadership thing all the time, as we get several of these communities, much like your friend you were mentioning, there's a natural outgrowth and desire that they want to hang out together.
Yeah.
Like I can remember several times when the missional communities in a certain part of town would multiply, the leadership, who all kind of grew out of the same nucleus family, said, hey, I miss everybody. Could we start getting together once a month for a big old meal and just get updates on the mission? Like how's that going? And we're praying for each other and praying for your sister and that neighbor and that guy that you hired, and let's get together. And then someone's like, you know what? We're having a common issue. Could you speak to this next month when we all get together? And pretty soon, the next thing you know, you're kind of speaking the gospel into some issues that are super connected to actual life and actual challenges or areas of growth. It's not just generic, hey, we're working our way through whatever, because that's what we do. And, like, hey, could we also spend some time, in musical worship together? Love to, and just pray for the larger family. Yeah. So next thing you know, you're kind of doing a lot of the traditional things that we've all come to do, but it feels more like a family reunion. You know what I mean? Going on.
That's cool. And
we used to hear it all the time. People, they assumed because we had 30, 40 plus missional communities in a town that we didn't gather on Sunday. So no, we always did. Or it might have been Saturday, or it might have been Tuesday night, but very often it was Sunday morning. That's still a culturally good time, right? And people would say, well, then we assumed that it sucked because you're so focused on all week. It's like, no, actually it doesn't. Jeff and I were both from mega churches. We've been given a little bit of a communication gift. There's so many good musicians here and people that are professionals at this. It's the easiest part of our week. That 2 hours requires almost no planning. The harder part of our life, is the intentionality it takes to 6 days and 22 hours, lead people to believe their identity and live out of the truth of their identity as a family of missionary servants, right? So, yeah. So it organizes itself as needed, but with great intentionality. So I tell people, think about when you met your wife. How many organized events did you insert into that at the date night, first date? Well, none. We had a date. We had to pick the time and we went to the place, but that was it. But as your relationship grew in trust, and now you had some kids, you decided you needed to buy a house, and you went from a part-time job to a career level job. And so over time, the organized and organics have grown. But if I asked you right now, like, hey, tell me about your family, you would not list off the organized things. Well, we pay the bills on the 3rd of the month. We do our chores, every Saturday. We try to get it done by 11. So because the kids got sports. On this day of the month is when we do the bills and we pay the bills and everything. And the kids get up and go to school at this time. I leave for work usually then. That's not how you tell me about your family.
Right.
You'd say, oh, my wife's the best. Talk about better half. Oh my goodness, Tina, she's like everybody's big sister, and everybody loves her. And she is the best cook. There's so much fun in food. She's a party waiting to happen. And that's why our kids have always brought all their friends home. I mean, that's how you talk about your life. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's how we get to talk about our churches as well. And so when you go from, we're going to live in our neighborhood, make disciples, develop leadership, that's going to multiply. They naturally want to hang out and congregate. It's like a family reunion, and it's very different to see people who came to faith by walking in the ways of Jesus and getting set free versus worst time of your life. You're feeling horrible, lost your job, you're an addict, your wife's leaving you, whatever. And I'm going to talk you into saying this magic prayer. And then I'm going to just beg you to come to church, man. And you're just less and less and less, and you're not coming. It's like, yeah, I don't know, man. What if we did it in the order Jesus said to do it and then modeled it? I've had a lot of pushback on that. Well, if what you're saying and Jesus is doing, if you walk in my ways and be my disciple, then you'll come to know the truth and the truth will set you free. Then we've been doing it backwards. I'm like, yeah. Or they'll challenge my hermeneutic. I'm sorry.
That's not an easy pill to swallow. So I'm sure.
Right. But I'll say, but check my hermeneutic. What did Jesus do? What order did he do it in? Did he disciple Christians? No, there weren't any. Right? There weren't any.
Yeah.
He said, come and follow me. And they did life together for 3.5 years, like all day, right? Every day. And then when he sent them out, go make disciples all over the world. Was it like of the church people who said the magic prayer? No, there weren't any. Like, this was always what he said and modeled, was you disciple people to the truth in the faith and then on to maturity. Yeah. And I think leadership development is just discipleship further up the slope.
Yeah.
To greater maturity. They're taking on more responsibilities for the family. Because, just like my kids when they were little, like if you could just get them to pick up their own toys, it was amazing. But as they got older, they had some family level responsibilities that were theirs, and they got to do that and bless the whole family through it. And that's how we look at it too, as we have multiplied churches and communities that way.
Yeah. I think I've got two more questions for you. One is, I'm sure at this point in the conversation, there's got to be some in our audience that are leaning in going, man, I want to hear more of this. And I know they can do it through your podcast, but what's the best way for people to connect with you, your platform, to check out some of the things you have to offer? Feel free to share that with us.
Yeah, thanks. Folks can just find me and the podcast and a whole lot of free resources at everydaydisciple.com. everydaydisciple.com. And literally you can download books there, audios, videos, find the podcast there. I'd love it if you'd come out and join me. I did an episode in November with a pastor friend of mine from Staten Island called "Is a Second Job Possibly Part of Your Calling?" Actually, it was really popular, as you can imagine, because he's not forsaking his pastoring. He loves his community, but he is finding that his calling is actually being expanded as he's working at the Home Depot and things.
I'm going to go listen to that episode.
It's really fun, and you can hear his level of excitement. I've known him for years. That's and awesome. As he started dipping into like more of his bivocational side, I was like, dude, you're like alive. You're awake. Like, he's just like, I know, I feel like more than ever. And so, yeah. And I would love it if they join me on the podcast. We just had our 6-year anniversary. 6 years of Mondays, no misses yet. Praise God. Lots of topics. And all of them, here's the common thread through all of them. Hey, how does the gospel speak into that part of our life, or that part of leading a church, or that part of my parenting or my marriage? And that's good news. And I could speak to others in that way, and it wouldn't sound weird or churchy. It's actually good news. So that's what we attempt to do, and I have a lot of fun with it. And sometimes it's just me. Sometimes I have guests. I'm privileged to know some people that are willing to be on, and every once in a while I get blessed and I get to be on.
Yeah. Well, congrats on the 6 years, man. It's someone who's done a podcast for a number of years. We can tell you that's a commitment to do that. And I've seen many people start podcasts and flake off after about the 6th or 7th episode. So to keep rocking year in and year out, I've been doing this since 2014. Les has been doing it a while as well. And, that's commitment to keep cranking that.
I love it though. I love it. I really do. I feel like our deepest ministry relationships come from the podcast now.
Yeah. I'm a podcast. Podcasting is my love language. If they ever rewrite the 5 love languages and add one, it's going to be podcasting, and that's my love language. So one of them.
What's your favorite podcast?
The one that I listen to the most is a mentor of mine for many years. His name is Dan Miller. 48 Days to the Work You Love. He wrote that book and has a podcast, and he has been a voice in my ear for many, many years now, just encouraging me really down this road. I can look back now and connect the dots and see where his voice has guided a lot of things. So
yeah, I love doing it. But yeah, folks, just head over to everydaydisciple.com. I'm not kidding you. There is so many free resources and things to download, and they can go further. I mean, if they go like, oh, hey, there's a course, it's like a whole $17, but it'll give me a full framework for making disciples in my own home and dinner table and neighborhood. Yeah. I'm not trying to fleece anybody.
Yeah, very cool. So here's my last question for you. And Les, if you want to add anything, feel free. But if there's a pastor listening to this right now, and it's not just pastors in our audience, we've got other people that are kingdom minded. They have a heart for the, work of God in this world. But, so we call it ministry. They have kind of a ministry mindset, but they're a little bit on the fence still about this whole thing of kind of leaving that safety, security of what they've known in the church world for so long and venturing out into the community to start something. We hear their stories. We hear a lot of imposter syndrome around that, a lot of again, just messages of guilt, shame, whatever. And you had a chance to just encourage them. And so what would you say to that pastor that's like on the fence about maybe I should go out and, whether it's get a job working for someone else or start my own thing, working for myself? What would you say to encourage that pastor, to give him a little nudge?
Well, I'd say that our Father loves you exactly the same if you, like my friend Tim, are pastoring and take a job at a Home Depot or not, or start a business, which he's also done. But you're loved the same. Okay. So allow our Father's favor to be the one who's most in your mind and heart. And when it comes to that, I know there's, these societal pressures. I got to tell my dad now, what's wrong with the church? I can't afford to, whatever. The other side is I want to tell you how much freedom I know of a lot of people who, when they feel that they're not necessarily just feeding a consumeristic maybe mechanism that it's starting to feel like to them, but they start to say, hey, God's routing some of his blessing and income to our family over here as well. They feel so freed up to serve, like out of freedom versus, well, if I tick anybody off, I'm not getting my check and all that. My wife and I started coaching a pastor and his wife just like 6 weeks ago, who was exactly in this situation. He had taken a part-time job in some counseling locally with a kind of a connected ministry to his church that he was associated at. And he was really finding life and love in that. And as we started helping them build out relationships in their neighborhood and all, very quickly, the Lord opened up some doors for him to be able to move fully funded there, to the point that he's actually decided, I think I'm going to leave my like 15, 17 years of vocational ministry, because right now God's bringing so much fruit, through all these other things, way more than I feel like I'm seeing, in the system. Right. Yeah. And he's still going to be a part of that church. And then they immediately said, we don't want you to leave. We don't want you to leave. What if you work 2 days? We'll keep paying you full time, and all that. So the Lord's working that all out, but he had to take a step of faith. I talked to him last week and he says, I've never had joy like this. I don't know if I've ever experienced joy to the level I'm experiencing right now. It's nuts. But I got to be honest with you, I'm fearful the other shoe is going to drop and it's going to go badly. And I go, what would be the worst thing that could happen? He goes, we go bankrupt and I lose my home and the family, and we're all living in a box somewhere, a van by the river. And I said, you really think that's going to happen? How many, how many times have you had to like eat out of dumpsters in your adult life? You know what I mean? I know people do that, but has God been faithful to you? Yeah. Why would he stop? Well, what he's seeing is he's been so faithful that now he's having to grow in his trust level. Like, is this good thing going to go away? So there is so much on the other side of trusting God always. And what God calls you to, all throughout Scripture, Old Testament, New, whatever God calls you to, he provides for. Yeah. So if you're feeling that inclination, like I'm feeling like I really do want to be more involved in the community, or I want to take some of the pressure off of the community to fund all of this, and I'm going to get a job and it's okay, it's going to fit in, I'm going to be great. If God's given you that desire, he's going to fulfill it and provide for that calling. I've never not seen him do that. Never. And I'm kind of an older brother at this point.
Amen. That's good. Les, you got anything else before we wrap up? This has been so good.
Oh man, just to say thank you, Caesar, for all that you're doing for, for the kingdom and also for community. It just sounds to me like you're looking for ways to reach out to your neighbors and the nations. That's what we're called to do. And however that's manifested, we're appreciative. We're appreciative of the work that you're doing, man. And thank you for coming on here and sharing it with our audience too.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Hopefully I'll get to come back and talk to you about some other aspects of this. Thank you so much.
Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the EntrePastors podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the EntrePastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our EntrePastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own EntrePastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at EntrePastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.